have a new game out, and it's called Little Big War. You can play it on your coffee table, go head to head with an opponent, build a base, train an army, destroy your enemies, capture the power crystals. More about it at the end. Okay, so I'll be honest, I did not have this on my bingo card for Dungeons & Dragons in 2025. This has been a really tough year for the game and for RPGs in general, and unfortunately for Dungeons & Dragons, it looks like it's all about to get a lot worse. Maybe terminally worse, because the horrible leaks that came out this year about D&D, the really nasty ones that we, or at least I, hoped weren't true, yeah, they look like they were true. And what this means for the RPG market is crazy. We're entering an unknown here, and things are about to get a lot weirder. And usually I like things weird. I mean, I regularly have very sexually charged dreams about Sméagol and Golem at the same time. But in this instance, I'm not so sure, because this represents a massive transformation for the industry that is very concerning, although also sort of exciting, like rediscovering your sexuality in your 60s. It's not entirely unwelcome. So what the hell is going on? Well, a nightmare for Hasbro mostly, because if you ask me, what is the worst possible thing that could happen to Dungeons & Dragons right now, I'd probably answer that it would be the game being abandoned by some of the biggest influencers in the RPG industry, just as Hasbro's new edition of D&D has launched. I mean, that would be pretty bad. But maybe even worse would be if Dungeons & Dragons was abandoned by its largest YouTubers. That would really suck, although it would pale in significance if worst of the worst were to happen and D&D was to lose every single person that made 5th edition so popular and great in the first place. I think any one of those scenarios would be an absolute disaster for Hasbro. Well, guess what? That's what's happening. Except it's not just one of those scenarios, it's all 3 of them happening all at once. Jesus, it's the Sméagol dream all over again. But hey, at least all those creators aren't moving to Hasbro's biggest competition and largest enemy in the RPG market. I mean, that would be unthinkable, right? You get the bit by now. You know what I'm gonna say. This is also happening. You see why D&D fans are so worried about the game. Now, this all blew up at PAX Unplugged this year, where we got our first hint that something major is going down. PAX Unplugged is a huge tabletop gaming convention focused on physical games, from board games to miniature games to card games to RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. And it's been going on for years. You can play games at it, go to panels. I think they give board games to orphans. But PAX Unplugged is also used as a launch pad for news. And this year's PAX Unplugged was a big one, because something happened this year that I never thought I'd see before. And I've seen a grown man eat an entire wedding cake alone. But this one takes the cake, because at PAX Unplugged this year, one of the biggest, oldest, and most famous Dungeons & Dragons actual play shows announced that they are officially dropping Dungeons & Dragons. They're leaving. They're not going forward with the new edition, and instead they're moving to Daggerheart, D&D's newest, biggest competition, the one that's being fronted by Critical Role. Now, you've heard of this actual play show before because everyone has. Their Acquisitions Incorporated, the penny arcade D&D comedy campaign that even has its own Dungeons & Dragons books. This was one of, if not the first actual play shows to have existed. Started all the way back in the ancient wizard days of 2008, and to this day is still one of the biggest in the entire industry. Yet D&D is losing these guys. Now, don't get me wrong, Acquisitions Incorporated have played other games at shows before, but their main game was always Dungeons & Dragons. But not anymore. Now they're doing what Critical Role didn't. They're moving their main show entirely over from D&D to Daggerheart and converting their characters from D&D to Daggerheart. Kinda reminiscent of when Critical Role moved from Pathfinder to Dungeons & Dragons, and they decided they needed to jump onto the biggest game in the market to not alienate viewers. There's a very similar energy going on here. So this is huge, and it's a massive win for Daggerheart and Critical Role. But it's coming at the expense of D&D. And that's not all. The news actually gets worse for D&D this week, because then we get to YouTube, and this is where it gets really scary. So enter the Dungeon Dudes. Not in a sexual way, sort of conversationally. I'm not telling you to enter the dungeon dudes, unless you want to, but you know, they also have to want to. Consent is an important element of YouTube and parasocial. You know what? Cut the ad. So, it's that time of year again, Christmas. And you know what that means?
Dark sacrifices to the ancient unnamed god of the woods.
But also capitalism and the Christmas rush, which you can avoid this year with today's sponsor, Uncommon Goods. Uncommon Goods are a fully curated online marketplace known for original handmade and meaningful gifts, and they partner with independent artists and small businesses to provide a huge variety of products that stand out from traditional retail stores. Uncommon Goods has so much stuff on here that are genuinely just perfect gifts for the people close to me in my life, like my grandma, and well, that's really it. I've been disowned by everybody else. But if you haven't been disowned, then this is perfect for you, because Uncommon Goods has a huge variety of products that you will just not find anywhere else. And I especially love this kind of marketplace because it allows small creators to get their products out there to you. And it's not only for gifts, you can get yourself stuff too. Like there's this Cocktails from the Crypt book that has a cocktail collection for pairing with horror movies. And I'd love to just make my way through this book, watching every single movie and drinking every single cocktail with my imaginary friends. It sounds like so much fun. So it can be yours and more. Just click the link below and you can get 15% off your next gift at Uncommon Goods. And thanks to Uncommon Goods for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so yes, D&D YouTubers, the Dungeon Dudes. Now, they're really big in the D&D space with over 500k subscribers and a fair amount of videos, over 1 million views. And they create Dungeons and Dragons focused videos about invigorating topics like the top 5 D&D classes, which are good, and top 5 Dungeons and Dragons. I'm underselling their content a little. They do listicles, okay? They create informative, very popular, and fun videos. I'm actually a big fan. Well, those guys sure love D&D. Until now. Because just this week, we saw the conclusion of a massive Kickstarter from the Dungeon Dudes, who have moved their famous Dungeons and Dragons adventure book, Dungeons of Drakkenheim, into the Daggerheart system, and it did really well in crowdfunding. And I have it on good authority that there will be more D&D conversions coming in the future from other content creators too, and likely even more new books. I mean, it's obvious why. This is a very easy win, not to mention a lot of moolah for lots of D&D creators to convert their Dungeons and Dragons content over to Daggerheart. I mean, there's a huge audience for this. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that Daggerheart is building a lot of momentum in the RPG space right now, and it's starting to really take off, and this is coming at the expense of Dungeons and Dragons. And it doesn't even end there. The story actually gets worse for D&D. Because remember Todd Kenrick? Well, he was the online face of Dungeons and Dragons in the lead up to the New Not New edition of the game that launched this year. He did all the marketing and helmed all the interviews with the D&D designers on the official Dungeons and Dragons YouTube channel. Well, during the summer this year, Hasbro decided to lay him off when Jess Lanzillo, the vice president of D&D, stepped down. But guess what? He's back, and now he's doing everything he used to do for D&D, but this time, he's doing it for Daggerheart. Videos, interviews, the official D&D YouTube channel is back, but now it's on the enemy team. And on top of that, the fact that the people he used to interview, you know, Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, the lead designers of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they've all moved to Daggerheart now too. This is pretty crazy, and it's kind of funny too. There's a bit of irony here, because all these 5th edition D&D guys, they used to work together in Hasbro, but now they're all back again, teamed up like a nerd version of the Power Rangers rebooted, only instead of a big blue head that they obey, they have Matt Mercer in a tube. Great job, Hasbro, you helped assemble the Power Rangers, but you're the ooze guy. So things are looking pretty wild in the RPG space going forward. The times they are changing, and people are starting to notice. Because whether you're a fan of the game or not, I think at this stage we all have to agree, Daggerheart is no tub thumping. You know, tub thumping. Remember? I get knocked down, I get up again. FIFA 98? Come on, you know the song. my point is that Daggerheart is not a one-hit wonder like a lot of the supposed D&D killers. I think if this game was going to come and go, it would have already come and gone. But the game does not seem to be failing. In fact, the opposite is true. The game seems to be getting bigger, it's attracting more talent, and it's starting to look like Daggerheart can really go the distance. It's Hercules in that first act. Hell, even during PAX Unplugged, there was a new expansion announced for the game called Hope and Fear that is adding new classes, new ancestries, new equipment, domains, basically a whole ton of new stuff. Like vampires, which is pretty sweet. And honestly, I've seen more organic discussion about that Daggerheart expansion, I've seen more hype around it in the last few days than anything announced for Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 edition recently. In fact, D&D, in contrast to Daggerheart, feels a little bit anemic right now. There's not much discussion or excitement in D&D online spaces, and that's adding support to those leaks that we got in the summer about the launch of the new edition of D&D. I mean, at the time, it was revealed by Stephen Glicker that the sales of the new, not new edition of D&D are way lower than we would have expected for Dungeons & Dragons, and that the new edition seems to be totally bombing. Now, since that information was dropped, it has been much disputed by fans, and in fact, Hasbro even said in a recent earnings call that the new edition of D&D is the, quote, fastest selling D&D product ever. But they've also never released any actual numbers to back that up. We still only have the Glicker numbers. In fact, in order to make their claim that it's the fastest selling product ever, it actually looks like Hasbro may even be counting sales of their digital and book package on D&D Beyond as two separate sales, effectively doubling the number of sales of the new Dungeons & Dragons on paper. This was literally a scheme in the office, so I'm not sure why Hasbro think they're gonna get away with it. But I guess it's just nice to say that the new edition is the fastest selling product ever. You know, if you count every sale as doubled. Now, we're not 100% certain that that's what they're doing, but looking at the earnings calls from Hasbro, I mean, they did used to report Dungeons & Dragons revenue as its own item, and in fact, they would brag about how much money it was making, until last year when the numbers started to dip. And then in recent earnings calls, D&D revenue figures have just been combined with Magic the Gatherings as one big tabletop gaming category, which doesn't make me confident that the D&D numbers have gone up. I mean, I've lied to enough bosses to know what all of this means. And I think that things are going to get even worse for D&D because we're facing a period here, potentially even more momentous than the OGL scandal. Because remember, during the OGL scandal, back then, when YouTubers, content creators, actual play shows, hell, everybody were moving away from D&D, they all moved on from covering Dungeons & Dragons exclusively and instead began covering a huge variety of different RPGs. Some creators started covering Pathfinder, some did Call of Cthulhu, some did Fatal, probably. They all scattered, they all covered different games, and as a result, they also kind of f***ed over the RPG niche on YouTube. Because YouTube wants to recommend videos to people based on what they've watched before. But if your fellow RPG enthusiast watches a Pathfinder video, and you watch a Call of Cthulhu video, YouTube doesn't know what to do with you. I mean, does it recommend you a Pathfinder video, or a Lovecraft lore video, or a swinging 20s jazz album? Or fish porn. It has no idea. You've confused it like Imperial Officer Twinks are constantly confusing young people's sexualities everywhere. So when every YouTuber started covering different RPGs, this really hurt views for everybody. It disrupted the RPG niche that had been built around D&D on the YouTube platform, the audience fragmented, and creators lost a lot of views. So it was no surprise then when eventually all the influencers and content creators, they all came back to covering Dungeons & Dragons again almost exclusively after the OGL scandal. And this time something similar seems to be happening, but it's different because all the creators that are moving away from D&D, well, they're not scattering everywhere. Instead, they're moving to a single new game. They're coalescing around a new leader, a single competitor in the algorithm. They're moving to Daggerheart, meaning that in the case of transition, the RPG market can still have a united audience, which is really important, especially for creators on YouTube, because YouTube already screws over creators all the time, hiding videos, demonetizing things. Like, for example, my videos get demonetized very often. In fact, this one probably has been, very likely because of whatever image my editor decided to use for fish porn earlier. So when you're a creator, you don't want to take a risk on what type of of content you create because things are so uncertain here, which is why Daggerheart's visible popularity is actually super important for creators deciding to cover the game or not. And all those risks to creators, by the by, is also why Patreon is so important. Please check out my Patreon. Link below. I genuinely need patrons to help me eat. Thank you. And remember, Daggerheart has an inbuilt audience of viewers. There's a huge Critical Role community out there who are motivated to watch content about Daggerheart and support channels that produce content about it, and they are active in RPG spaces. That goes a really long way to help make creators confident in deciding to cover the game. And it's funny because I've heard some people say that Acquisitions Incorporated are moving their show away from D&D to Daggerheart as a panic move by Critical Role and Matt Mercer, who need Daggerheart to have a dedicated actual play show because, you know, Critical Role are still running their campaign in Dungeons & Dragons. But I don't think so. I think that this is an organic reaction to the success of Daggerheart by a group who genuinely like the new game and want to play it, and know there's an audience for it. And also, now Matt Mercer is joining them to play the game too. I don't think this is as cynical a ploy as some people are saying. But taken all together, this whole thing isn't a shattering of the RPG market so much as it's potentially a move from one dominant game to another. And I'm not sure I want to say it because people are going to make fun of me if I do, and I get enough of that already about my Hobbit obsession. I just like the hairy feet, okay? But I have to ask, are the conditions right? Have the stars aligned? Is this it then? Is Daggerheart the mythical, the venerated, the prophesized Dungeons & Dragons killer? Is Daggerheart becoming the biggest RPG in the market? And the answer is probably not, right? Like, even with a ton of creators, I don't think any game will ever have the brand recognition of Dungeons & Dragons. But it does look like Daggerheart is at the very least sliding into the number 2 biggest RPG spot right after D&D, the coveted cuck spot. And traditionally that number 2 spot has a lot of competition, and what is the second biggest RPG game in the world often changes depending on the year. It has been occupied by Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, My Little Pony, but it looks like Daggerheart is starting to overtake them all, and at least for the foreseeable future is going to be the big number 2 game. But Hasbro have to look out because Daggerheart, just like D&D, is a heroic fantasy game. It tells similar stories to modern D&D. It has game designers from D&D. It is now stealing actual plays and content creators from D&D, and a huge portion of the D&D audience are also huge fans of the creators of Daggerheart. So this game could truly penetrate D&D culture like no game ever before it. Just like you need to penetrate your enemies in Little Big War, my new miniature war game that you can buy right now from the link below. It has rules for building a base, training an army, collecting power crystals, and destroying your enemy. Destroy them with a horde of tanks, destructive nuclear weapons, or overwhelming hordes of monsters. The choice is yours. Little Big War is designed to be fast-paced, fun, and accessible to anyone. You don't need to have played a war game before, but all you do need are some miniatures and a coffee table. It's an affordable price, so why not buy yourself it for Christmas? You know you want to, and it helps support the channel. There's an awesome community on my Discord. You can join that now. It's been really awesome seeing everybody getting crafty with the game. And if you want to, you can also check out my Patreon to help support the channel. I really do rely on viewers like you to keep going, and I will continue to cover RPG news. It's like an exciting time for the industry, so subscribe and stick around. Thanks so much, and a massive thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye.